There's some familiar faces I'm seeing. Mike Willig here.
It is, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mike Willig, I ain't seen that. How are you, man?
Very good, thank you. Yes, I say, I've not seen you for 1,000 years.
I know. Gee, yeah. So you talk about a blast from the past.
Yes, I know. This is what it's like, isn't it? People are still around now, aren't they? Thank goodness. Yeah. So, how's life?
So it's all right. I've got considerably less hair probably from the last time.
I'm sort of hanging on to mine. Yeah.
Yeah. We need photographic evidence of that.
I need to find some. I'm looking at some wood to touch. There we go. That'll do. Touch wood. Yeah. It's good. I've seen everybody's living rooms.
Notes down. We're just confirming whether the video.
Right. So, just after 4 o'clock. Obviously, if people arrive late, I will let them in. But oh, hang on.
Fine. I'll just show Charlotte creates these.
Just a couple of people. If I could ask you all to mute yourselves, apart from Julian and Becky, of course, then we don't get any background noise. You can have your videos on if you like. It would be nice to see you, but understand if you don't want to. And I'm going to hand over to Becky and Julian. They can introduce themselves better than I can. So with no further ado, I will do that. And at the end, they're really happy to answer any questions you've got. And the easiest way to do it is through the chat facility. So if you pop any questions as they come to you in the chat, and they'll get to them at the end. And enjoy it.
Thanks, Julie. So thank you, everybody, for coming and listening to us. We'll try and make this as entertaining and as painless as possible. As Julie said, if you've got any questions throughout it, just pop them in the chat and we'll pick them up at the end. As a favour to us as well, you know, if you wouldn't mind screenshotting and posting on LinkedIn and tagging us and things like that and letting us know what you thought of this thing, just so that Becky and I know whether we overpromised or not, and hopefully we've hit the mark. Thought we'd better tell you a bit about both of ourselves first. Becky, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I've had a circuitous route to my freelance copywriting career. So started with a degree in English, which is a pretty solid start, moved into sales, and then ended up deviating to human resources. So ended up working in HR for about 13 years for sort of big UK brands like Royal London, Bupa, did lots of internal comms. And then about 4 years ago, quit all of that, became a freelance copywriter, and yeah, things have gone from good to great for me. So I've recently just been rated 5 stars by one of the world's biggest tech companies for some internal comms work that I did for them. And I would say that I specialise in internal comms and also long form lead generation as well. So yeah, that's me.
And I'm a good old fashioned ad man. I love persuasion and ideas and making people buy things that they don't necessarily know that they want and things like that, and big brand ideas, and using language and design and ideas to persuade people. And that's my passion, really. And so I've kind of poured all of this into this with Becky, as it kind of says there, you know, copywriter, creative director, an ideas guy. But let's move on, shall we? So basically, to start with, the reason why we're kind of focused on the idea, copy and design kind of aspects of it is that fundamental beliefs within effective advertising is that ultimately, yes, you need a great idea, and we're going to come to ideas last in this presentation, but dressed around that great idea, you need some beautifully persuasive, well-written copy, which Becky's going to talk us through shortly. And you also need some very, very kind of, cute little kind of design techniques that guide the eye and attract the eye as well. And that's what we thought we'd kind of just cover, because ultimately they're the kind of triumvirate, if you like, of effective advertising. So, when we look at effective advertising, the reason why you need all of this stuff is simply because, the eye and the mind is bombarded with advertising messages, as you all probably know. There's a lovely stat from up there, 1970, message today, 5,000. And so, it's important that you find ways to kind of cut through this kind of noise, if you like. And it kind of, it's a lovely kind of, Ogilvy is one of my kind of heroes, and I know a lot of people's heroes in advertising. And, there's a great kind of thing from Ogilvy on advertising where they talk about, placing ads and the wrong type of ads in magazines and places, etc., can have as much damage as not advertising in itself. So, there's a lovely kind of little quote from here, and that's why you need good persuasion, good idea, and good design kind of techniques. So, as we mentioned, we're going to cover persuasive copy techniques, which we're going to start off with first. Then I'll jump onto some design tips for response, and then we'll cover ideas. And then we'll answer any questions that you've got. And, feel free to just, as we said, tap them into the chat function, and Julie will ask them all at the end. Becky.
So let's get started with persuasive copy techniques. So this is another lesson from Ogilvy, why not? So how much does copy matter? I love this story. So there were two adverts placed in the same magazine. They took up the same space, they both included images, and they both had carefully written copy, but one had outsold the other by 19.5%. And why? It's because of the appeal, and that's all down to the words that are used and the design. So one of the key things to remember with copy is that how things feel can actually matter more than the facts. Emotion drives action, and information drives analysis. So we need to make sure that you're really tapping into that emotional part of human being psyche, as well as following out with the facts. So let's get started. So we've got a couple of different examples of some advertising copy here. One is from the Wall Street Journal many years ago. I think this is an Ogilvy example. And the other one, a more recent piece from an advert for The Economist. So both of them are actually talking about the same thing. So the long form story on the left, it's a story about two grads, 25 years on, they meet up, they work for the same organization. One of them is the head of a small department, and the other man is the president. And the difference between the two is what each person knows. So what we get on the left-hand side is a long form storytelling technique. And on the right-hand side, we get the same story, but in about, 5 words. So on the right-hand side, we're filling in the story. So it's actually that same sort of storytelling technique. And even though it's sort of 50 years apart, 60 years apart, maybe, it's actually the same technique that's being used. And that's because human beings, we're the same. We haven't changed that much. We haven't evolved that quickly. So those techniques that apply from many years ago still apply today. So this is a really, really good tool. And this is a tool called VoiceBox, and it really helps with tone of voice. It's been developed by Nick Parker. He's a creative director, so we'll just give him his dues there. And so how we talk to people is as important as what we say. And VoiceBox has come up with these 11 fundamental styles of language, the tones of voice that make up all brand communication. And you can use those in both B2B and B2C. I think that you tend to see more different tones of voice in B2C copy than you do in B2B. That's been my experience. So in B2B, I think that companies tend to stick to 3 of the 11 tones of voice. So you've got warm friend, purposeful tone of voice, and simplifier. And I think these sort of 3 can be blended so that you can come up with the right tone of voice for your business. Obviously with B2C, you've got 11 different tones of voice, and you can blend them in any way that you want to talk to your audience in the right way.
If anybody wants that 11 tones document, by the way, if you just email Julie and we can send you it as a PDF. It's not, it used to be available online, but I think it's, I don't think you can get it anymore.
Well, I'm glad I downloaded mine when I did, Julian, because I've got a copy. So it's quite handy. I think one of the things that I've noticed for marketing teams is that internal comms is really coming into the marketing function, perhaps a bit more than it maybe used to in the past. So it's good to know that the same rules that apply to your marketing content and your marketing materials also apply to internal communications. So the example that we've got on this slide here, I was doing some work with a client, with the HR team, actually not the marketing team, and we were talking about what tone of voice did they want to talk to their employees in. And they said, oh, we don't really have a tone of voice. And I said, well, you do have a tone of voice, because this is what your marketing team uses to talk to customers. And so you can see here it's got sort of three components. One, fresh thinking. They don't want to be fluff, guff, full of fluff, guff, geek and weasel, which I like. They want to be energetic, full of vigor, fresh thinking, fresh words. They want to convey passion, but they want to keep it all plain and simple, so it's straightforward language that they use. So that's what they're going to use for their marketing. But the HR team actually said, this is exactly how we want to talk to our employees as well. So this is a really good example of where tone of voice can run throughout the organisation for internal and external comms. So here's an example of applying a nice clear tone of voice to internal comms copy. It can have a really big effect on how you talk to your people. So on the previous example here, this is the original copy on the left-hand side. So it's perhaps a bit stiff, would we say, doesn't really talk to people directly, whereas the updated copy, it's much shorter, it's more succinct, it's to the point, and it's much more human. So it's really talking about we and us, not using phrases like the company. It's really introducing that human tone of voice to internal comms. So a nice tip, this came from an interview that I did with Kat Lewis, who's the head of global employee engagement and internal comms for Reward Gateway. They're an employee engagement company, so they do know their stuff. And something she said really struck me. And she said that whenever she writes corporate communication, she makes them personal. So she never says, hi everybody, or hi guys. She always puts the individual's first name in every single internal comm. So just as we do now with personalized emails for marketing, it's exactly the same for internal comms. And the result that she gets with this is that when she meets people in the business and they meet her for the first time, a lot of them say, oh, I feel like I already know you, because they're having those one-on-one conversations with her throughout the internal communications. So a really nice little technique to help with writing is the inverted pyramid. So this is a really classic writing technique. It's all about getting the right information in the right place so that we can hook people and then get the information through to them in the right order. Really good for things like news articles, blogs, longer form copy. So you can see here, pretty straightforward, most important information at the top. So you've got your headline, your first paragraph, hitting people with the hard facts, the information they really need to know. As you go down the article, you get the next set of most important details in. So this could be your quotes, it could be people, date, restrictions, what people need to know next. And at the bottom, you've got more of the background information, requests for detail, and obviously a call to action as well. That's just a nice little structure. So here it is in practice. What you've got on the left-hand side is copy that is probably all the information the company wants to convey. On the right-hand side, what you've got is the information that the audience wants to hear. So it's upfront, Sutton Bridge closure and the 505 service, how it might affect you. That's exactly what the audience wants to hear. So it hooks them in with that initial headline. So our favourite three-letter word, you. We all want to talk about ourselves. We all we are the centre of our own universes. Let's put it that way. So using the word you keeps people focused on what you're doing for them. So it's all about focusing on the audience, making sure that it's the copy that you're writing is engaging, it's benefit-led, and you're answering that "what's in it for me" question. So again, another example here. So instead of having you sort of third line on the first example, it's right up front in this updated version. So you could win one of 3 £100 Amazon vouchers for just 2 minutes of your time. So I think it's in there 6 times. But when you read it, obviously it's highlighted there, so it's stands out like a sore thumb, which is the idea. But when you read it, normally, I don't think that you would notice that it's in there that many times. It doesn't feel overstuffed. It feels quite natural. And I think that's just because we all like to talk about ourselves quite a lot and have everything relate to us. So this is a biggie, so sentence length, and this is probably one of my Achilles heels actually. So when I write a first draft, I can quite often find that my sentence length is not as mixed as perhaps it should be. So on this example, we've got this sentence has 5 words, here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. So mixing things up really does help. I would say that where a lot of people get stuck with writing is having a lot of mid-length sentences, so around that sort of 20 to 25 words in a sentence. So if you can find ways to cut those down and include some shorter sentences, do it. This is a really good example here. So if you look in the bottom paragraph, the 3rd paragraph on the right-hand side, you've got that sentence that says, and best of all, 4 words on its own. This is the kind of thing that a copywriter would do and the client would push back on, would probably cross out that full stop, put a comma in and join it on to the rest of the sentence. And the challenge with that is you get a really long sentence, which isn't good for mobile, as we all know. But the benefit of having it this way is that, and best of all, really jumps out at you in that copy. So, and it also helps to keep that sentence length varied and keeps it interesting. The other thing to point out as well is that sentence starts with and but sentences are perfectly fine. As Julian pointed out to me earlier, the Bible has many sentences that start with and but, so there you go. The resource I always talk about is the Plain English campaign. If you're writing a sentence that starts with and or but and you've got a client pushing back on it, there's online material, Plain English campaign, that's your evidence. It's perfectly fine to do it. I think people have had maybe some hard lessons at school. So a biggie of repetition, this can really work wonders in copy. So repetition really reinforces your point. It creates a pattern, and our brains are wired to look for patterns, that they jump out, they're memorable to us. So alliteration is a good example of this, using the same letters at the start of words, or in these cases, actual words have been repeated. So ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, slight play on words there, or many people have paid the price before me and many will pay the price after me. So those just jump out.
Okay. Going too fast, sorry.
That's all right, don't worry. So there's another couple of examples here. So we've got take a survey that values your opinion, a survey that could win you £100, just really hits the message home that it's a survey that you want people to take. The weekly ticket for unlimited journeys in your area, the weekly ticket that will save you £. And so this again is another biggie. So emotions. So we said this already. So how things can feel matter more than actual facts. And it does bear repeating, because as humans, emotion drives action for us. Information drives analysis. So we make a decision with our heart subconsciously. And then we back it up quite often, or we seek the information that backs up that decision. So a really good example of this is when my next door neighbour in my old place came around to me and said, do you want a new cat? And I said, no, not really. He said, well, there's a new little tiny cat next door, and he's with somebody who shouldn't really be looking after animals, and she's not looking after it very well. And he tugged on my heartstrings, and I'd already decided I was going to have that cat. And then it was only afterwards when I talked to my other half, and we said, well, can we afford another cat? And then we decided we made the facts match the emotion. The emotion was, I want that cat, and we made the facts match it. And that's exactly what we want to do with marketing. We want to hook people in with emotion. So this is something that I use with my clients. I'm going to say this wrong, Plutchik. It's a Plutchik, I think, wheel of emotions. And this is all about taking customers on a journey. So when your customer arrives at the piece of content, at the advertising, whatever it is they're looking at, they'll be in a particular emotional state. And it's really helpful to understand what that emotional state is, where they're starting from, and where you want to get them to. And I've did some quite interesting work with a client, actually, around this. So quite often what I find with B2B clients is that they want people perhaps maybe stressed, busy, curious, and they want to move them from that position to feeling confident in the product that they've got to offer, ready to act. This was a B2C client that I was working with. And his company is a private waste collection business. And the challenge that he had was that his customers were already paying for the service through their council tax. They paid their council tax each month, and they wanted their bins to be collected with no extra cost. But the bin collections have been reduced to every other week instead of every single week. So they had overflowing bins despite paying their council tax and paying for the bins to be collected. So when they arrived at his website for private bin collections, they were pretty angry and they were quite annoyed because they didn't want to have to pay again. So we needed to move people from angry all the way through to acceptance and being ready to pay for his services. And we did that using humour and having a neighbourly tone of voice. So a very warm, relaxed, friendly, the kind of tone of voice where you'd be chatting to your neighbour next door, non-confrontational. So yeah, that was quite an interesting emotional journey to take people on. So yeah, here are some examples of different emotions that you might want to put into copy. Annoyance, this one would really tick the box for me. If you don't buy a weekly mega rider, getting to work will cost you more. I mean, I'm tight-fisted, so that one would get me every time. Temptation. So temptation is a strong emotional, don't know what the word is. It's a strong emotion. There we go. So it basically works by activating the brain's reward system. So the way that our brain has evolved is to reward us for things that feel good. So by tempting people with a promise of a benefit, you can tap into the way that the brain works. So here's 10 reasons to come work for Stagecoach. We guarantee number 7 will have you applying. A little bit clickbaity, but there's a reason it works, and that's because of the way our brain's been developed. So pratfalling, so I'd never heard of it called this before, but yeah, sometimes highlighting your flaws can be more appealing. So there's some really good examples of this from Guinness. We know it takes a long time to pour a pint of Guinness, but good things come to those who wait. Avis, the second, for a long time there are the second car rental business in the States. So they've made something out of that and said, when you're only number 2, you try harder. And the reason this works is because it's to do with highlighting flaws, and flaws are human. And by highlighting the humanity in a brand, it actually makes it much more likable. So here's an example, another one. One prick of a needle can lead to a winter that's flu-free. There's going to be short-term pain for long-term gain. So this probably underlies all of the copy that we write. So promises, promises, promises. People don't buy because of what you're providing, but because of what you promise. So we've got 2 headlines here. A revolutionary approach to bodybuilding, or you too can have a body like mine. And it's that second headline that makes that promise that gets us thinking, oh, a body like mine, you know, brilliant. You want that next to obviously the right photo, not a photo of my body. And then that will work wonders. So there's a couple of others here. So the secret to achieving that killer look is all in these little details. There's that sort of temptation, that curiosity combination going on there as well. So dramatisation, this taps into storytelling, which is obviously done the rounds a lot in marketing recently. It's been the buzzword, but it works because it gets people to put themselves in that situation. So this is a technique where you're trying to get the prospect to experience as much as you possibly can. What would life be like if they've already bought that product or service that you're trying to sell? So this again, coming back to fitness. So imagine standing in front of the mirror, your figure looks trimmer, your jeans noticeably baggier at the waist. It's the start of a healthier you. With our tips, you'll soon get there. That person's in that moment, they're living that experience. Flattery. Oh, we all like a bit of flattery, don't we? So getting a compliment in there up front. I think it sounds cliched. It doesn't. I know that if I go out networking, one of the first things that I'll do is find something really positive to say about somebody. Maybe I've read something of theirs, I've seen them online, I like their social. It works. It works in one-to-one situations. It works with marketing. So don't start with dear valued customer, slightly condescending perhaps, but you can almost become very personal with the way that you talk to people. So exclusively for A-star students like you, this simple recipe guide is packed full of ... Another nice little technique is the rule of 3. So we talked about sort of seeking out patterns, and the brain really likes the number 3. So we've got here the song 3 is the magic number. It's actually based on fact. If, like me, you like to watch interior design programs, you will know that interior designers never put things in a 2 or a 4. It's always a group of 3 pots, 3 candles. That works. The brain likes it. It also works with words. Education, 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 friends, Romans, countrymen. These are famous sayings. They're things that stick with us because we like that number 3. Another couple here. Oh, Julian said to me, oh, what about COVID? What about COVID? And I actually had to go away and look up the current number 3, which I think is hands, face, space. There we go. Had to think about that. But the one that worked better, I don't really know why that one doesn't work so well, but the one that worked better was the original one, which was stay at home, save lives, protect the NHS. And that one seemed to really stick with us. So if you're coming up with groups of 3 words, maybe worth doing a little bit of A/B testing just to see which works and which doesn't. And maybe the government could have tried that with hands, face, space. Jumping slightly ahead here, this is an example of using the power of 3 in design. So not just necessarily with words, but with the way that you set those words out, combined with the design, that works really nicely. Imagine that envelope with 2 columns on it. It's just not as powerful. Technique here to help you find the benefits that you're going to be promising to customers. So this is the FAB technique. So we want to relate every single aspect of a product or service back to the individual, back to the customer, because they want to know what's in it for me. So this technique really helps you focus on this. So you've got the feature. We all know to avoid features, we need to get to benefits. But what you can quite often find is that you can translate the feature into an advantage, and you think you've got the benefit, but you're not quite there. So if you use FAB, you'll go from feature to advantage to benefit. And this is an example of one. So the feature, the batteries are made with alkaline. The advantage is that the battery has a higher energy density. It stores more energy than non-alkaline batteries. But the benefit of that to the customer is that your electrical item will work for longer. So you might think you've got the benefit, but you could well be at advantage. Here's another one. Knives are precision forged in high carbon steel. Your advantage is they will last a lifetime, come up sharp every time. But the benefit for the customer is that you can prep faster and safer for longer. So to help you work through that FAB technique is the so what technique. So every time you've written down your feature, you're saying so what till you get to the advantage. If you can still ask so what and come up with another answer, you've got to the benefit. So this is a quote from Victor Chen, ex-McKinsey business advisor, author guy now. He said that customers don't know the difference between two products unless they buy and use both. But when do we ever buy and use both products? We only ever buy one, really. So they simply choose whichever company offers a more compelling benefit or a more credible promise. And that's why this FAB technique is so important. So here's another example. This really breaks down the benefits of a battery. So packaged in Duralock power preserve packaging. So what? The advantage is it won't lose its charge while it's on the supermarket shelf. So what for the audience? So what for the customer? It will have as much power in the battery as the day that it left the factory. So you've got all the way through there, from right through to your benefit. So I'm going to hand over to Julian here and have a drink.
Well done. Breathe. Yeah, so I'll quickly take you through some kind of design tips as well. Again, let's go back to Ogilvy, and it's kind of always important. I always think that if you're writing anything, that you should always think visually of your copy. I mean, if anybody ever saw any of my actual copy sheets, I actually kind of almost designed them in Word, almost, subhead, bullet points, call out boxes and things like that. For me, if I can't really if on that copy sheet it doesn't start to look and feel like a press advert, I'm not really kind of happy with it. And I think the same is true. For me, you should always kind of look at whether it's brochures or websites and things like that, having some of these call outs, boxed out sections, quotes, images, graphics, charts, they're like almost a tick list, really, to make sure that it won't bore the eye. We don't want just a plain kind of bank of text. And there's kind of some kind of little kind of rules that a lot of people kind of forget. And again, this does kind of go back to almost my student days of learning graphic design and things like that as well. So, short opening paragraphs, for example, are very compelling, because if something starts off and feels easy to read, you're more likely to continue reading it. And those are kind of strange psychological effects that a lot of people forget. It's simple things like aligning left. Forget about using, sometimes if you're talking to an older audience, for example, stay away from sans serif fonts. Use fonts like Courier, for example, as well, because actually Courier creates a baseline that's easy to read. Now, a lot of designers will, screw the face up at Courier, but actually it's a very, that with Times and other fonts like that with a serif are actually really easy to read. Bullets, again, really kind of, a lot of people kind of shy away from them, but again, they just attract the eye. They become easy to read. I always call it understand at a glance. If you can understand something at a glance in 3 seconds, you're winning. And why? Well, because we've got this journey to disrupt. I mean, this is a little thing that I pulled out from a shopper journey, but anything with copy techniques and design techniques is always about, getting in on this journey, initial consideration, all the way through to post-purchase experience. Those little gaps are there to be disrupted. And some of the ways that you can do this are a little bit kind of, you might look at them and think, oh, well, these are a little bit kind of, obvious, but actually it's amazing how many people forget about them. So, for example, zigging, BBH always said this brilliantly, when others zig, you zag. And a lot of people kind of forget that. I always love this from Starling Bank about just a different way of doing a credit card. But the same can be true within design. This is a project that I did for Snickers, where we looked at a kind of almost a brand flag, and how we can use the brand flag to really kind of stand out and actually attract the eye and just do something disruptive. If you look down in the bottom left-hand corner down there at all the multitude of FSDUs in supermarkets and things like that, using something where it uses bold, confident kind of colours just actually attracts the eye a little bit better. And the same is true in other things as well. This use of angling, that you see a little bit of in that previous example, is a clear signpost for the eye, because whether the eye's looking at an email or a social media posting, or whether it's walking into a shop, it wants direction. It wants to know where to look. Otherwise, it will just move on. These are some email examples that I've collated. Look at the subtle ways that angling is used. Look at the Kate Spade one, how the images are used to guide the eye down. And the same with the words. Look at the mint pink one, the text. Everything's angled to take you somewhere. Especially the Nike Air one. Look at the background sound angling, and actually how the pictures are positioned. Those hexagonals take you down to the faces, etc. You know, the Sephora one is a little bit more obvious. Everything, notice which way the pens are pointing and things like that, and angle. So angling, because what it does, it drags the eye down, and the eye has a natural flow. A lot of people forget about the eye's natural flow. The actual eye goes in angles downwards. And the same is true with partial and staged disclosure, and this is why movie trailers work so well. You know, we love intrigue, we like to kind of be played with, and we like being teased, and you can do this a lot of different ways. Here's a lovely example from the US, where you know, it's a little bit of a gamification, you know, this simple pull and reveal, and a lot of people forget that actual design and things like that can be fun. And I've got a digital example of how that can work as well. But here's one from one of my clients, where what we did, we used a second window and we purposefully hid and chopped off the amount, the saving amount. You know, loyalty is worth a lot, and so you can't see the discount amount, but so you've got to open it to reveal it. And sometimes the trick is just getting people inside the envelope. I mean, you know, you can do that a lot of different ways. Here's a digital version of the same thing. You know, it's a little arrow with a little kind of design lip, tempting you to peel that back and things like that. There's always kind of find ways to kind of do this partial reveal, to not show them everything, but you know, tease the eye to want to know more. One of the things that really surprised me at the minute is direct gaze, and how a lot of people have forgotten the old technique of direct gaze. And direct gaze is simply using people staring out at you. This is an old home shopping technique. You know, a lot of people forget that for decades, a lot of catalogues that used to sit around the home and sit on shelves and things like that would always have a model staring out of the pages. And the reason is because we're automatically attracted to somebody's eye, and so each of these adverts drags you in. And you can use this in quite a lovely way. This is a project I did for Duracell, where we looked at why certain packaging was working better than others. And okay, you could argue that it's a cute bunny, but actually it's actually the bunny's eyes that are attracting you in. And so, you know, even direct gaze in characters and things like that is just a powerful draw to kind of get the eye in, and can really kind of give you the edge within design. Similar irregular shapes. Again, a lot of people think this is really obvious, but again, it's amazing how many people have forgotten the art of irregular shapes. And usually because sometimes they think about them and just think they look a little bit like kind of naff, a little bit too salesy and things like that, but you can use them very subtly. Aldi are great at using the irregular shapes and using the guiding the eye technique as well. But you know, Clarins and high kind of value brands like that are very kind of open to using the irregular shape. And I always say, in a land of squares and lines, you know, it stands to reason that circles stand out, and so you should just go for it. Don't resist it. And so there's a few kind of little ideas for you. As what I'll kind of do now is, before we get on to kind of questions, is show you some ways that you can create ideas, because you know, a lot of people kind of think that you've got to be creative to kind of come up with ideas, and you do to a certain extent, but there are tools and techniques that you can use to come up with ideas. I think this is a great example, which is obviously steal like an artist, and it is about stealing, and the fact that ultimately is anything original, you know, but there is good stealing and bad stealing and things like that, you know, and paying homage and kind of you know, really kind of doing your research and lovingly kind of you know, treating a kind of an idea. I think this is a great quote from T.S. Eliot, you know, about bad poets deface what they take and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different. And it is about that that level of intelligence that we're doing there. And so, you know, some practical kind of tips for idea generation. Boredom frees the mind. I mean, I love walking, and for me, walking and, you know, that moment before I fall asleep and things like that are probably my best times for ideas. And that's why I always take a pen and paper with me, or sleep with a pen and pad next to my bed. You know, Becky was talking to me about how she has two desks. She has her analog desk and a digital desk, and you know, and again, I advocate that as well. I think, you know, having that place where you don't have technology, you can switch off from it, and you can just use your mind. And sometimes what I do as well, I put myself under pressure. I purposefully make the deadline shorter so it really focuses my mind. Thomas Edison used a technique called dunking, as he fell asleep. And again, I've done that as well. That idea of just lying there and letting your mind wander. So here's a couple of other kind of techniques that you can use to force ideas. This is one of my favorites, actually. I've used this a lot with clients. It's called pass and build. So basically what you usually find is when a group of people get together to come up with ideas, you usually find somebody who's very dominant within the group and whose ideas will always come to the fore. They'll be very vocal. We all know the type. We've all been there. Certainly anybody who's worked in an idea session with me knows that I'm usually that person. But what this technique does is basically it levels a playing field, and it makes sure that everybody has a chance to kind of have their idea heard. So you do it in silence. So each of you has a card, and you write your idea down on a card, and then you simply pass it to the next person, and they have to build on that idea. You can't be negative. You've got to take that idea, you've got to see the merits in it, and you've got to craft it and build on it. And then what you've done when you've written your addition to that idea, you pass it to the next person, and essentially what you have all these ideas going round in a group. And you should try it. It's an amazing way. You'll find it really positive way to kind of come up with ideas, and actually, like I said, it levels the playing field so the entire group has the opportunity, because sometimes the best ideas come from the meekest person in the group who just isn't comfortable speaking up. Oblique strategies. This is another one of my favorites. So I'm a big Brian Eno fan, from his time in Roxy Music and his time as a producer. And he developed a thing to get through creative blocks and push lateral thinking. There's two ways that you can do this. There's an app, and you can just use cards as well. I've actually got a deck of these, and basically what you do is if you want your mind to go in a different direction, or you're faced with a creative challenge, you simply pull out one of these cards and you basically do what the card says. So a famous story on this is one of the cards said delete and start again. So apparently U2 were struggling with a song, to complete a song, and Brian Eno basically suggested that they all went out to dinner and things like that, but little did they know when they'd gone out to dinner he deleted the master tapes, so they were forced to start again, and actually they got there quicker because they were forced to start again. And again, so he does practice what he preaches. This is the app. If you just go find Oblique Strategy, it's a wonderful app to use. You can just shake it and it'll come up with a new thing to kind of send your mind in a lateral direction. I use it a lot for presentations with clients as well. Random stimulus. If there's any Bowie fans out here, random stimulus is one that Bowie loved to use to write his lyrics, and basically what it does, as you might expect, it uses visual stimulus to make the mind, and you make you make connections ultimately. So what you can do is you basically take your challenge, you write a challenge, I don't know, come up with an advertising campaign for big biro pens or something like that, or convey why the big biro pen is better than a high expensive pen, and you just find an image and you try and relate your problem that you're trying to solve to an image. It's a wonderful technique. Some people find it a little bit cheesy, but sometimes it's just a good way to get your ideas started. It's just a good way to get the rubbish ideas out first, so that you can then start to, you can actually start thinking. And then here's just some kind of common techniques that a lot of advertising creatives use that I just thought I'd kind of pull out. This is one of my favorites, exaggeration. Just sometimes exaggerating what your benefit is or what your advantage is, as Becky highlighted before, and that's why you'd use the FAB technique or the so what technique with this exaggeration. Can actually make a really kind of fun creative ad. I mean, this is one of my favorites for Mercedes, the first concert hall that is a Mercedes, and it's just a simple, beautiful visual treatment. Again, just uses exaggeration. There's a great one here for KFC, which I'm pretty sure most of you have seen, with the hot wings. And again, there's a kind of, this is SEDEX-alike, a FedEx-alike, so you can trust that the glass will get there before the orange juice it's the table. It's what's known as expedient exaggeration, which is a common advertising technique. again, without words. So sometimes, you know, dispensing with everything that Becky said before with words and just using visuals as much as possible, you know, and you basically work out the meaning in your head and try and create what we call the aha experience. So for example, you know, this one for Talk Tennis, you know, sports radio thing, it's just simply just a little cute little kind of addition to the tennis court, you know, says it all. Again, this is one of my favorite ones, you know, Lego and imagination. It's just, you know, so beautifully simple. Is this one, again, just doesn't need any words. And again, for Colgate dental floss, you know, he removes the smallest of pips. You know, it doesn't need any words. Great little ad. And again, you know, turning it around, so kind of taking, you know, a benefit and showing it as a negative, or taking a negative and showing it as a benefit. So, you know, taking those features and benefits and can create something really quite fun. So this is a great one. This is the best one from this campaign, but you know, there was a beautiful one where there's loads of dogs up a tree and a cat down at the bottom. You know, I think this is kind of in the same vein, but it is that whole ultimate thing about, you know, turning it on its head. Again, you know, the ketchup that tastes so good that the actual chips become the accompaniment is just a different way of thinking, and quite a common technique that, you know, when you walk down the streets and you'll see a lot of ads, this is all it is. It's just simply turning things around. In there, you know, and this is literally turning it around for Oil of Olay. Perspectives. Becky, do you want to do this one to finish off?
Yeah. So trying to think about your product from your audience's perspective is the key to marketing, good marketing. So what we basically care about as buyers, people who are looking for a product or service, is that it's going to either make us look good, it's going to make life easier, going to make us look successful. But when you are really ensconced in that product or service yourself, it's almost like you can't see the wood for the trees. You need to take a step back and look at the product or the service a little bit differently in the way that customers will see it. So there's a good technique that you can use to help to understand your customer's perspective. So the product that you're selling is an expensive fountain pen. It appears to be a writing implement, and you would think that it might compete with biros and pencils, but actually it's a status, it's an upscale gift, it's your Mont Blanc pen. If you think about something like that, that would compete with designer wallets, luxury watches and jewelry. Another example, the Harley Davidson motorbike, you're not competing with other motorbikes or other ways to personal transport. Couldn't get my words out then, but what it is, it's a symbol of rebellion and freedom. So it's about competing with sports cars, maybe even hair transplants, and divorce for a younger woman. So thinking about the product in a completely different way will give you really great ideas and a different way of looking at the product to market it.
And I think, you know, using this technique and just being ridiculous with it, sometimes you've got to go there to come back. And so actually, you know, taking if it's a recruitment agency, what does a recruitment agency appear to be? You know, what does it appear to compete with? But actually, what could it compete with? Could it compete with TED, for example? You know, in the same way that Creative Resources kind of done lots of lockdown learning, same way that TED does. So, you know, you can really kind of start to reimagine a product or service using this technique. If anybody's interested in anything that we've covered today, obviously we'll send this deck around. I'll correct the spelling mistake at the beginning as well. Sorry, Becky.
I didn't even spot it, Julian. I'm not sure what that says.
There's lots of books out there that you can read. I've just kind of put a few of them together. Choice Factory, it's kind of like a York Notes version of Vance Packard's Hidden Persuaders, but you know, there's lots of kind of great books and things like that. I don't know whether we've got any questions, Julie. It's no. I think you're on mute, Julie. Not sure. No, you're not. No questions, right? Okay. So if anybody, you know, please screenshot and tweet and you know, make comments on LinkedIn and things like that. If anybody's got any questions, want to ask me offline or Becky offline, please message us through LinkedIn. We're easy to find. And thank you all for attending. We'll make sure that this video and the actual the presentation that you just seen, you can have it. You know, it's our gift to you. No big secrets here. So we'll send that along. And thank you all for attending.
Oh, thank you all. I'll send the slide deck and a link to the recording over to you in the morning. And thank you very much, Julian. Thank you, Becky. And that was really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. It's brilliant. Thanks.
See you again sometime.
Cheers, Mike.
Take care, mate.
Good to see you, man. Becky, just hang on for a minute, would you?
Yeah, will do.
Oh, you covered loads there, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I know I went over. I was trying to go really fast, but without
No, it doesn't
going
matter.
too fast.
No, it's all right. I pulled it back round. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, and somebody messaged me to say they were frantically trying to take notes and was they're going to. I don't like to tell people at the beginning that we're going to send the information out because it can make some people switch off.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll send all that out.
Right. Cool. What I'll do is I'll resend you this PDF. I've just corrected that bloody spelling mistake. Sorry, Becky. That's my fault. Is that?